Hi, and welcome back to BeanTalk. Today we have the special honor to talk to Ben Carlson from Long Miles Coffee. And so we got a little online meeting with Ben here. And so Ben, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with us here from BeanTalk today. And first off, I would just like to ask you, for people that are not familiar with Long Miles, what is Long Miles Coffee, or what is it that you do?
Thanks for having me. This is fun. I always love telling the story of Long Miles. It's it's special because Long Miles was birthed out of a dream of my co-founder, who's my wife, and I, back in 2010. We had moved to Burundi, and I was just a coffee trader. I say just, but I mean, it was in the industry, just trading coffee in Burundi. The coffee sector had just privatized in Burundi, and I'd done a consulting trip into Burundi, and I just saw this amazing, beautiful, 100% Bourbon coffee that it was all going into these, instant coffees and Folgers and just groceries. It was just being wasted on the world. And so it was like the first part of Long Miles was, okay, it wasn't even a company. We were just sourcing coffee for a European coffee trader. And it was kind of my crash course in coffee trading and coffee exporting, because I had just done consulting in South Africa for 10 years, setting up cafes and roasters and barista programs. And so to move to Burundi was just this whole new world of what's the other side of the coffee industry. And I think what we don't realize in the specialty coffee world is the coffee industry. It's an industry. It's like this big machine that's rolling. And I was all of a sudden part of that machine. And that machine is bent on making sure that farmers, that are the most vulnerable, lowest kind of peg on the totem pole, they get kept in poverty. And it's not that anybody's evil and nobody wants to keep them poor. It's just that, the power dynamics mean that farmers never have the control, the power, the agency to get out of poverty. And so when people say value chain, that's exactly what it is. It's like a chain. And so I would say for, the first 2 years that we moved to Burundi, I was just part of the chain, keeping the status quo, keeping farmers poor. And really, and I mean, you can look at it all the way through to roasters. Roasters will say, it's not that we're making all this money. It's a tough job to, you might be in Austria or Berlin or London and roasting coffee, and you have to pay the rent and the staff and everything. No one is really I don't think anyone's being purposefully vindictive against a farmer, but I just saw that, wow, it was a tough situation, specifically for the farmers, because they're the most vulnerable people in the industry. So in 2013, we decided that we'd start Long Miles Coffee, which was, let's not be a coffee trader, let's produce coffee ourselves. So let's not source coffee, but let's grow it with neighbors, and let's build our own washing station where we can collect everybody's cherries, pulp them, ferment them, and then in Burundi, it was a matter of then we would be able to then directly market our coffee and our neighbor's coffee that we've pulped and fermented together directly to a roaster in Germany or in the United States. And so it was just this big audacious dream.
I was about to ask you how you came up with the idea, but it kind of sounds like it just happened. Or maybe, how did you end up in Burundi?
Yeah, I think it was a time period when in 2007, 2008, Burundi had transitioned, and the World Bank gave a large grant to the country. But part of the strings attached to this grant was that they had to privatize the coffee sector because the government was controlling the coffee sector. So it was kind of it was very kind of hard process for the country to figure out what that would look like. So in 2010, really, the country just was slowly letting go of some of the washing stations and selling them to multinationals. And so I was one of the first people to be able to move into the country and have access to cupping through all the different washing stations in the country, finding out where the good coffee was coming from, and then to be able to hone in on separating those lots out from the specific washing stations that were the best, to be able to showcase to the world that Burundi had this special coffee. And so that's kind of how even the birth of Long Miles came from. Was like all of a sudden I knew all the coffee in Burundi, I knew all the washing stations, I knew all the flavor profiles, and I was able to say, wow, the best coffee is from kind of this specific area. And it's I always say that we kind of had got an unfair advantage when we started producing coffee, because it's like nobody else had really been able to spend 2 years just cupping coffee.
That's so awesome. So you really were like a pioneer in Burundi coffee-wise, or at least in the private sector there.
Yeah, for the private sector, and I think the government sector and a lot of the big companies had gotten Burundi coffee for a while, and I really kind of attribute to even my being able to go in and start doing that to the pioneers of specialty coffee, who they were the real like trailblazers, like Jeff Watts at Intelligentsia and Aleco and Stumptown and Counterculture. These guys actually were the first ones. No one had ever done it, and they just had to find a way. So I was able to really gain off of their, at least there was some kind of world culture of like, we want this special micro lots. And so then I was able to really move in and see how they were doing that, and then make that, work for Long Miles.
So right now you're not limited to Burundi anymore, right? So what other countries do you operate from?
We saw that what we were doing in Burundi was, building a washing station, working with a community, and now we have over 5,000 families that also have small farms. Like we have a small farm, but then everybody's got small farms. So we have 5,000 small farms, and then so we have 3 washing stations we built. And we just started thinking that this model, it was really an impact model for a community. And we thought we really wanted to see if we could transfer that model, but contextualize that to different countries. And so we started dreaming about Kenya kind of next as kind of my dream country. I love that cup profile. I love SL coffee. It's just this, who doesn't love a nice
amazing
citrus and lemon and maybe a little tomato, but I've been told don't say tomato because nobody likes to think they're drinking tomato coffee. But so
it kind of is in there.
Last year, yeah, it is. It's like if now that I say it, you're gonna drink your coffee. You're like, there is tomato. Like,
yeah.
So last year we decided we'd see if this model would work in Kenya. So we started. There was a family that we're friends with on Mount Kenya in Kirinyaga County, and it's Heron and Margaret Wachira, and they had an old family factory. They call them factories, the washing stations in Kenya, that had been abandoned 20 years ago. And they said, well, why don't we do this together? And I said, this is a great idea. So they put up the land, and then Long Miles came in and built a washing station on the land, and then they partnered with 30 neighbors, and we produced 30 bags of coffee, which was not, but it was a pilot project, and that was last year. And the coffee was really good, and all the other neighbors saw what we were doing, and we're just kind of watching. And then this year was our first real year of production, and 30 farmers turned into 600. So now,
just within a year.
With 1 year, it's exciting because we wanted to see if this idea of dignity and value for farmers and fair prices and added agricultural help through agronomists, would that translate into farmers wanting to work with us? And I think the resounding on the ground story is absolutely. So now this year we're as we're recording this, we're in the middle of dry milling our first real harvest out of Kenya. So that's as
That's
we
exciting.
speak. So that's why tomorrow morning I'm jumping back up there to check the dry mill and make sure that our lots are being handpicked correctly. But kind of at the same time as the pilot project we saw was working, we decided that Uganda, Western Uganda, was really the next frontier of specialty coffee, because I don't know about where you're at in Germany if you ever get a good Ugandan coffee, but sometimes you get a CP Falls off Mount Elgon in eastern Uganda, but really you just kind of get this kind of chocolatey, kind of almost like a dirty cup of coffee. And and the reality is Ugandan coffee is SL. So it's the same beautiful citrus bergamot tea-like coffee, but it never tastes like it because of the processing. So we are, as we also speak, last week I was just in Uganda, and we bought some property in Uganda to start, and we've just started laying out the drying tables for our Rwenzori Mountain, Long Miles Rwenzori Mountains. And
wow,
we have a team of what we call coffee scouts, which are young people that graduate from high school, need to work, and we train them how to be agricultural specialists. They go out and they're talking to the farmers about picking ripe cherries and sensitizing farmers on different agricultural practices. And then we're gonna start up in the fly crop in about 3 weeks. We'll be producing our first ever Ugandan coffee.
To be honest, I didn't know that you were operating out of Kenya as well now. I was just getting a bag of coffee from La Cabra from Denmark, and I just knew it was some Kenyan coffee. And then I took a closer look at the bag. It said Long Miles, and I was like, wait a minute. But yeah, I love the coffee. It's super juicy.
Oh man, that's so good to hear. And La Cabra does such a great job, and they're one of the lucky few that got some of the first couple bags of the coffee.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we wanted to do, is really showcase. And I think one of the reasons we went into Kenya was Kenya's got beautiful coffee. It's got a great story. People have been getting coffee, but some of the challenges that we're finding is that to have long-term relationships between roasters and a producer are hard to do. So that's what we're trying to do in the sector in Kenya and Uganda, Burundi, is have those long-term relationships of really what a relationship is like with a roaster, where we partner, we find out what you need, you find out what we need, and we work together for impacting community, but also for just stellar coffee.
It's awesome.
Therefore, I would like to ask you, because we're talking about washing stations before and farmers working together, it seems quite different from the systems maybe many people, including me, know from South America, of like the big farms where like farmers have their own kind of huge industrial style kind of farm. So what's the differences, or what are the differences of coffee farms in like countries like South America, like Guatemala, for example, compared to Kenya, Uganda, or Burundi?
So in Burundi and Western Uganda especially, the average farmer has less than 200 trees, and each tree produces less than a kilo of cherries. So each tree is like, it won't even produce a single bag of coffee for you that you would sell in the cafe. So it's the reality is these are underproducing trees with tiny little farms that are often just subsistence farms, and coffee is just one of the agricultural products that the family is using to live on. And usually coffee is their one cash crop. And so they're, as I was just talking with a community leader, and we're just starting in to work with them, and they said, we're so happy you're here, because right now each family in the community is living on less than 80 cents a day, the equivalent of 80 cents a day. Wow. And it's just not viable. So kids aren't going to school. There's malnutrition, there's water issues. And, with Long Miles, we're not coming in to be these Western saviors. But what we're doing is coming in to say, well, what are the strengths of this community? And one of the strengths is just beautiful coffee. And that's what we know. I don't know other things. I wish I was more talented in so many other things, but I know coffee. I know how to produce coffee that can really maintain that, the terroir, the taste of the place. And that's what we're able to then translate for this community and just help the community to transform the assets they have into something that can hopefully be a part of the solution to kind of break these chains of poverty, and also create just a beautiful showcase of dignity and value for them to have a, consistently, generationally better existence too.
That's amazing. And also you're working together with the communities. I really admire you for what you're doing there. It seems like you work with a lot of passion.
We are the tagline for Long Miles is coffee people potential, and it kind of revolves around this idea. It revolves around this idea of the passion for each of these things. Like we have this passion for people, and that's just this. We got this beautiful spot where we're friends with the farmers, our local fellow farmers, but we're also friends with roasters and consumers as well. And so it puts Long Miles in a really unique position, and it's really it's just a really great place to be. And one of our the virtues of Long Miles, or one of our kind of our principles is a Latin word called adventurus, and adventurus means about to happen. And so we're always kind of thinking what's about to happen.
Maybe going from Long Miles as a whole to the coffee production itself, what does a typical day for you look like? Like working on the farms, etc. What is it that you do on a daily basis?
It's a lot different than what people would think of, like on a larger scale farm. Like if you're in a Guatemalan farm, or a Panamanian Brazil farm, where you're either mechanized or you have huge amounts of labor. For us, it's a lot of going and being with smallholders. So we might go and just check on a dozen different smallholders and checking how they're pruning their coffee. Are they mulching? Doing some demonstrations on a community farmers plot to help the rest of the farmers understand what it's going to take, because we've recognized that if we don't give, especially in Burundi and Western Uganda, there's a knowledge gap, and it's not because they don't want to do better. It's just because of all the war and the conflict that happened. That there's a sense of scarcity, and when you have a sense of scarcity, there's not an investment back into your coffee. And so, because coffee is kind of a long-term income generator for farmers. So our day, out of season would be going to farmers and doing some teaching and training and demonstration of how to take care of little coffee. You can't call them plantations. little coffee shambas is what they'd call them here. And then during the season, it ends up being long days where coffee is harvested through the day, and in the kind of the afternoon through the late afternoon, evening, coffee's delivered to the station, where we're floating, hand picking out under and overripes, and then pulping sometimes until 4 a.m. The coffee delivered by all these small little farmers carrying 5 kilos, 20 kilos, 100 kilos of cherries, and then we're very careful about separating them by specific hills so that the traceability stays intact. And so we'll be pulping coffee until 4 a.m, and then we have another shift of people come in at 7, and then they're doing the fermentation and the rinsing and washing and grading of coffee. And then we have another group of people that's out on the pre-drying of the drying tables, just turning and making sure that the sun doesn't overheat the parchment. And it's every day. It's during rainy season, so often on probably 3 times a day, we're covering the parchment with plastic and then uncovering it for the sun, and then covering it and uncovering it. So at the peak of the season in Burundi, we'll have over 300 local farmers that are also working at the washing stations, helping to produce the coffee.
Wow, that's crazy how much work goes into producing coffee, especially compared to other crops. Like here in Austria, for example, we have crops like apples or apricots maybe, and you can just go and basically cut it off. Not like coffee where you have to go back and harvest it over and over again.
Yep. and that's the thing, like with Bourbon especially, and in Burundi there's no fertilizer. And so the tree, when you have fertilizer, the tree can ripen usually 2 different days. Like it ripens once and then it'll ripen a second time, so it's easy to harvest. Whereas in Burundi, you might go to the same tree 6 different times. So you're constantly harvesting if you want to have ripe harvest. So it's just a lot more labor, a lot more hands-on to be able to do that.
Wow.
When is harvest time in Burundi, Kenya, and Uganda?
So Burundi harvest is going to start sort of end of March. So right now is the pre-season where we're helping farmers determine, making sure that they've done, there's some last minute things on the trees that we can do to help them. But we're also getting the washing stations prepared to receive the cherries. So that'll be from April, May, and June. There'll be coffee harvest, and then kind of tailing off in July, and then we'll start exporting, in September and October, November. And in Uganda, there's actually a fly crop. Our first ever crop is going to be from the fly crop, which is going to start in about 2 weeks. So some of the early fly crop lower down in the mountain started actually this week. So we're on a race to build tables to get ready for the fly crop.
Yeah.
But the main crop in Uganda, as well as central Kenya, where we are right now, starts around August, September. So kind of as Burundi wraps up, Uganda and Kenya start up. Okay,
so constantly work for you.
Oh yeah, it's year round. Now we've really done it now. We're in for it now.
Okay, that's it for now for today. We're going to continue our conversation with Ben next week, so definitely make sure to check it out. It's worth watching for sure. And yeah, until then, drink loads of good coffee and see you next week. Bye. All right. If you enjoy our videos, please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. And also maybe if you have some ideas for future videos or topics that we could do in our show, just put it down in the comments and let us know. So yeah, thanks so much for watching and see you next time. Bye.